Welcome to the Brodart Tell Me More Diverse Voices webinar. Today, we're excited to welcome 6 authors who will be sharing their new books and the great stories behind them. Our moderator, Suzanne Hawley's career spans from a school media specialist, a professor of children's literature, a Newbery Committee member, and co-author of a children's literature textbook. Susie currently is a collection development librarian at Brodart. She has over 20 years with Brodart, specializing primarily in children's and young adult titles. Over to you, Susie.
Hi, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. We have 6 remarkable authors, and I think you're going to learn so much and have a wonderful time looking at these books. We're going to start with Christine A. Platt. She's an historian and a multi-genre author of African and African American fiction and fantasy. She has carved a unique path in the world of literature and social change. She holds a BA in Africana Studies from the University of South Florida, an MA in African and African American Studies from the Ohio State University, and a JD from Stetson University College of Law. Wow, that's a lot of school. She currently serves as the executive director for Jacqueline Woodson's nonprofit residency for artists of the global majority, Baldwin for the Arts. Many people know her as the Afro minimalist, lifestyle strategist who advocates for less as a sustainable lifestyle choice. After getting her law degree, she moved to DC, and these are her words, hell-bent on making meaningful change in the world. She soon fell in love with the city and its people, and she can't imagine living anywhere else. The Lost Tooth is the third title in the Frankie and Friends series. Ms. Platt says that although her only daughter is now in college, she continues to draw on their adventures together for inspirations for her stories. Frankie has her first loose tooth, and she's torn between going to the writing conference with her mother or staying home so the tooth fairy can find her. Her cadre of delightful dolls and her cat, Nina Simone, came up with the perfect plan. Aaliyah Marley adds to the fun with her illustrations. Over to you, Christine.
Thank you so much for that beautiful introduction, Susie. It's so funny to think about being in DC and think about, Frankie and Friends and think about my daughter who is now a senior in college that really inspired the series. It is just, that was a little personal recap for me that made me a little emotional. And I think anyone who writes for children, there is sort of that connection that is always there with some young person in your life, be it our own kids or students, nieces or nephews, someone always serves as a little nugget of inspiration. And it's the same for Frankie. My daughter was super curious. She was a handful in terms of always keeping us on our toes, in the sense that she was always investigating something, usually without our knowledge until things got crazy. And so, I definitely wanted to make sure that that was explored in Frankie. And even though my daughter did not become a journalist, I feel like so many children are their own sort of little mini, journalists for their families, for their schools, for their communities. And between Nala and that sort of storytelling that I've heard from so many other parents and teachers about kids being mini reporters, inspired Frankie and Friends. And The Lost Tooth, I think, is a really important book because Susie, as you mentioned, I do have a background in African American history and culture. It's always going to be a through line through my work. I also have a background in social justice and advocacy. And the first 2 books in this series sort of touch on that theme, right? The first book is Breaking News, like really getting children to understand just some of the key components of journalism. What's an opinion? What's a fact? the big protest is just as the title suggests, and really got parents and kids to sort of think about the political process through a child's lens, which actually ended with the book Holding a Toy Protest, which is like my like favorite thing in the world, is to see kids making little signs saying, peace and love, and holding these toy protests, and really getting an opportunity to understand civic participation even at their young age. Excuse me. And so it was really important for me, for The Lost Tooth, for it to be just about being a kid, not weaving in, any sort of teachable moments beyond imagination, curiosity, problem solving, and making it fun and ridiculous, as it often is when it comes to young people. And so Frankie and her friends, as you mentioned, Susie, her dolls, King Tut and Queen Cleopatra, they're always arguing. And that is just an opportunity for kids to understand and learn. Not everyone is always going to get along. Here's what it looks like to have ridiculous discourse and debate, and how sometimes it can be beneficial, and also other times just purely unnecessary. But of course, you have to see that on the page in order to recognize it in your own life. And then lastly, we have Robert the robot, and he's a character that I really wanted kids to start getting an understanding and language around AI and technology that has taken away so much of the natural wonder and curiosity from childhood. And I think storytelling is really an opportunity in a way for us to return and restore that in young people. Her cat, Nina Simone, and Dan, the teddy bear, who's a little bit of ADHD. And so kids can see that in themselves as well. And lastly, her best friend, Farah. And so this series is just a fun, delightful series to teach children about journalism, honest and accurate reporting, and then also just being their natural curious selves as little reporters, and putting some fun into that part of their lives. And so there you have it, Frankie and Friends, The Lost Tooth. Oops, Susie, I can't hear you.
One thing I forgot to mention earlier, and I think it's really important, is that this is an early chapter book.
Yes.
So the whole series are early chapter books, and they are delightful.
Thank
But
you.
I want to tell you one thing before I go on, but I actually taught at the University of South Florida, taught
What?
children's literature, and I lived in DC for 10 years. So isn't
Oh
it
my
funny? I mean,
goodness.
every time we have authors on here, my life gets smaller and smaller.
Thank you so much, Susie.
Now, I loved it that you talked about the animals. Did your daughter have all those wonderful animals?
Oh my goodness. Let me tell you something. That kid had every stuffed animal, every doll. They had every accessory. I wasn't the Afro minimalist at the time, so it was a very maximalist life throughout the house. And they were, I mean, the way that Frankie interacts with her dolls is literally like how they were part of the family. And those dolls lived a good life, man. They lived a good life, I'm telling you. And so, yeah, that definitely is inspiration from her. And I think, just so many other kids I've met over the years who really see, their toys as an extension of themselves and a part of the family.
Yeah, definitely in that book they are. That was really fun, and it was fun to see them all and to hear them all talking. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you, Susie.
Alda, you're next. And Alda P. Dobbs is the author of two historical novels. Her debut picture book her debut novel received a Pura Belpré honor. Alda was born in a small town in northern Mexico, but she moved to San Antonio, Texas as a child. She received a bachelor's degree in physics from the University of Texas in San Antonio and a master's degree in engineering from the University of Texas in Austin. She worked as an engineer before pursuing her love of storytelling. She's as passionate about connecting children to their past, their communities, different cultures, and nature as she is about writing. Alda lives with her husband and two children in Houston, and she moved recently from Madrid, Spain. The Giving Flower, The Story of the Poinsettia, is a lovely lyrical picture book by Alda about the history of the poinsettia. Gorgeous illustrations by Emily Mendoza enhance the text. I surround our house with poinsettias at Christmas, but never knew that what I thought of as the red flowers are really bracts. And the red flowers are small and yellow, or the real flowers are small and yellow, and they're the ones in the center of the cardinal bract. Alda will share lots more information with us about the history of the poinsettia. Please go ahead, Alda.
Well, thank you so much for having me here. I'm honored. Thank you, Elenita, for organizing this, and Susie, thank you for hosting this as well. I appreciate all the work you do, and for the patience too, because we're in the middle of an RV trip right now, and I'm in Grand Tetons right now, so I'm getting eaten up by mosquitoes. I forgot to spray myself, and now there's
Oh.
mosquitoes all over here. But I'm excited to share about my picture book, The Giving Flower. So yes, just like Susie mentioned, I was the same way. I thought the flower itself was a poinsettia, the red bracts, the red leaves. But in fact, yeah, the actual flower or the little tiny ones in the that you see in the center. So I got curious about the flower because in my writing in my books, I'm always trying to make connections. I was born in Mexico, moved to the US as a baby, but all I knew was Spanish when I went into school. So I think as a way to comfort me as I struggled learning the language was to make connections between my culture and the new culture I was learning, as well as the languages. So when I was looking at the poinsettia and the carburetor line with my kids, I knew there was a connection to Mexico, but I didn't know to what extent. So I started doing that research, and it turns out it was the Aztecs the Nahuas who discovered the flower, and they're the ones who saw it, raggedy out in the wilderness and brought it to life. So I was amazed by that fact that a lot of cultures, then the Spanish came, and there's the legend of Pepita with that. Then you had different people throughout history who brought this flower, made it better and improved it and whatnot. So I want children to see that connection between cultures and also eras and generations, but I also want them to search that beauty that's hidden out there and to bring it out into the world. I want them to be curious, just like every person was, trying to bring this flower to what it is now. So it's the illustrations, like Ms. Susie mentioned, were by Emily Mendoza. And yeah, she did a phenomenal job, as you can see, very vivid. And like it just starts the story in Guerrero, Mexico, because that's where the flower is from. And it goes through the whole history of it, of the Aztecs cultivating the flower. And at the very end, you get the background, you get the author's note, you get the whole historical facts of the flower, and also the names, because the name varies from country and culture. So you'll learn more about that. And they did something really neat here with the information I provided. They have a timeline here. So I love the way they they laid out the timeline here. It's beautifully done, and also the end pages. I think they're lovely. The illustrator and the director did a phenomenal job. And the book is also, it comes out September 2nd. And we also have the Spanish version. I don't have the Spanish book with me, but I have the poster board here, and it's called La Flor Generosa. And I did the translation. So I'm really excited about that, because I tried translating my novel, Barefoot Dreams of Petroluna. And it took me about 2 weeks to translate the prologue, the short prologue. So that's what I said, you know what? Now leave it for the professionals. But I took on the challenge to translate this book, and it was a challenge. I really poured my heart and soul into it, because like I tell kids in school, words in Spanish and English vary in lengths. Spanish words are a lot longer than English words. So you have to think differently when you want that flow. And I worked so much and so hard in this translation that now I think I prefer the Spanish version now than the English version. But yeah, so I do presentations in English and Spanish, virtual and in person. So if you're interested, I'd be happy to get in touch with you. And if you have questions about the poinsettia, by all means, get in touch with me. I think you're muted, Ms. Susie.
Myself unmuted. And I took my picture off somehow too. I mean, I've been flubbing the technology today terribly. Anyway, I'm curious about how long it took you from the inception of the idea until the book was actually ready to be published. Not until it was published, but until it was ready to be published.
Ready, you mean like the art's done and
Yeah, you had
everything?
yes.
I would say about 2.5 years, or probably 2 years. Yeah.
The reason I asked was because I read about your very first book when you first started out with an article, and then they asked you, then nobody, accepted that, and then they asked you to write a longer article, and you said that when you finally had someone who bought the idea, you were pregnant with your first child, who was 7 when the book was published. So
Exactly.
I thought to
Yeah,
myself, I
that's
wonder when this happened with the poinsettia. I have to tell, here's another personal story. I lived in San Antonio for 4 years. I got my master's in library science at Our Lady of the Lake University in San Antonio. So I told you this world is getting smaller and smaller for me. But interestingly enough, when I got my master's, I then became the manager at the Twig Bookshop. And I noticed that you do presentations there. That's funny.
I do. I did my first I because it was during COVID. So a lot of bookstores were closed or they didn't want to do it. And because it was my debut launch for my debut book novel. And but the Twig was the only one that said, just welcomed me with open arms. And being from all my family and friends live in San Antonio. So every time I have a book launch, I go to the Twig now. So
That's great.
and they've been phenomenal. So that's amazing. I'll have to say, tell Claudia that.
It was fun for me. The next person is Jan Thomas, and she goes by J.E. Thomas. But I read that there were so many J.E. Thomases that it has to say author, children's author after it. But then I said, "Do we call you Jay?" She said, "No, you call me Jan, but there are more Jan Thomases than there were J.E. Thomases." Now, she grew up near Colorado, Front Range Mountains, and currently lives in Denver. And even though I lived in Colorado for 5 years, I had to look up where the Front Range Mountains were. I was happy to see that I too live near the Front Range Mountains. So Jan spent her early summer stuffing grocery bags with books at the local library, reading feverishly and then repeating the process week after week. And here is a wonderful line from one of her biographers. "It's not surprising that she thinks books plus imagination are the best streaming service around." Isn't that interesting? An interesting thought. She's an award-winning writer with bachelor's degrees in mass communications and political science and a master's degree in public communications. She began writing full-time in 2021. Prior to that, she had a long career in corporate healthcare and education communications. The AI Incident is her second book for middle graders. I don't think I can introduce it any better than the Publishers Weekly Reviewer did, and said, "Beneath the madcap plotline of this AI adventure lies a touching story about belonging and overcoming obstacles." And isn't it interesting that Christine has already mentioned AI today in her presentation? So, Jan, it's up to you now to tell us all about this wonderful and crazy story.
Thank you so much, Susie. I want to make sure that you can hear me. Yeah. Okay,
can.
great. I'm off mute. I believe, just as you said, that libraries are amazing and librarians are superheroes. I think the magic of libraries is that every book is a portal to a different experience in a different world. being exposed to those books at an early age changed my life. And my hope is that the AI incident gives young readers the same opportunity to have an adventure that they may have never thought was possible. And yes, like Christine, I'm talking about AI, which is this inescapable technology. It seems to be everywhere. But the AI incident doesn't center technology because I think it's so important to realize that it's not a question of what technology does, it's a question of what we do with technology. So this book focuses on 12-year-old Malcolm Montgomery, who is the unluckiest kid in Colorado foster care. He's not been able to get adopted, and he's just on a quest now to find a forever home. But like so many kids do, and like I myself do, Malcolm internalizes external situations. So he thinks that the reason he hasn't been adopted is because there's something wrong with him. And that's the reason he creates the How to Get Adopted checklist, because he thinks that if he checks all of the boxes and if he follows all of the rules and if he does everything just right, he will earn a family. And I'm making quote marks around earn because that's his belief. And he winds up engaging in a battle of wits against Francis, who's an autonomous AI that was brought to school to raise standardized test scores. And I think some of those words are going to resonate with librarians and with teachers, words like standardized test scores and internalizing external situations. What I think is really fun about this book is that Francis does what AIs do, which is it pursues a goal no matter what stands in its way. And it makes big, big promises to Malcolm along the line of, if you do this for me, I'll do this for you. And that can just feel irresistible when you're a kid or when you're an adult. The AI incident doesn't say whether or not AI is good or bad. It doesn't say if we should use it or not, but it raises questions for readers to consider, such as, can you really be friends with an AI? Because it seems so easy. You just open an app and it says, can I be your friend? And you click yes, and boom, according to AI, you are now friends. Um, it also raises the question, can you believe everything that AI tells you? And are all AIs the same? I did a little research when I was working on this book by actually going to a few AI platforms to ask how many different AI platforms are there in the world and in the US, and the numbers ranged from 16,000 to 62,000. So who knows what the actual number is? But what's really important is to know that there's not just one AI platform out there. A couple of the other things that I like about this book and that I think will be fun for readers of all ages is that it explores what's involved in forming a friendship, and it acknowledges that making human friends takes time. It deals with the issue of loneliness, which has been called a crisis of loneliness in the US, and that affects people of every age and background. One of the things that I think is really intriguing is that when you're lonely, that changes the way you present yourself to the world. It changes how you walk and how you talk and how you see things. Sometimes it even changes the way you breathe. The AI incident is also full of humor. I regressed right back to my 12-year-old self to find the things that I thought were fun. And the chapters are short and not intimidating. So it's a really good fit for reluctant or anxious readers. So for all the librarians out there, I hope you add the AI incident to your collections at home and at the library. And if you'd like a virtual chat with your readers, just to let me know, contact me via my website, and I'm happy to beam in and chat with your readers.
Thanks, Jan.
You
And
bet.
I first of all, I'm really glad you said that about short chapters, because sometimes I just read James Patterson because he only has 2-page chapters. you know?
Me too.
And so I'm sure kids feel that way once in a while.
Yeah.
So that was really interesting. And I wondered the whole time I was reading it how you managed to put yourself in there as not just a 12-year-old, but a 12-year-old boy.
Yes, yes, that is such a good question. I took a writing class years and years ago when I was trying to figure out what my author voice would be. And the instructor said, you find your voice when you write in the emotional age that you currently are. And for my first two books, apparently that is 12. So I just stepped right back into my 12-year-old self with no problem. I made the character a boy because for these first two books, I needed some separation. Otherwise, it was really easy for me to place myself in the book. And amazingly, the character was just perfect. So I needed to put a little separation there.
Well, it's a fun book to read.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much.
Thank you.
And next we've got Cale Plett, and we're going to talk about his lovely book, which is called Wavelength. And Cale, I'm so sorry. I never lived in Treaty One territory. I never went to the schools or taught in the schools that you're at. So I'm afraid we can't connect on that basis, but we'll figure out a way to do it. So Cale Plett is a non-binary, gender-fluid writer who lives on Treaty One territory in Winnipeg, Manitoba. Their poetry and short fiction can be found in a whole variety of journals. Wavelength is their debut YA novel and revolves around a teen pop sensation who has remained anonymous by always wearing a covering over their face. With the threat of finally being unmasked, looming over them, they run away hoping to live a normal life. Cale will tell us how and why that doesn't happen. Cale has a BA in creative writing from the University of Winnipeg, attended the Emerging Writers Residency at the Banff Center for Arts and Creativity, and is a Lambda Literary Fellow. Certainly, they are a literacy educator and guitar teacher, or currently, I meant, and can be found wherever their favorite people are, preferably with live music to listen to, board games to play, or lakes to swim in. Whatever genre they're writing, they try to create spaces where queer characters can exist safely within their identities. Okay, Cale, it's up to you now to tell us about this fascinating story.
Okay, awesome. Yeah. So, I guess what I'll do is maybe I'll talk about some of the different sort of main parts of Wavelength and what I think is special about them.
Okay.
Um, so maybe the first thing is to talk about why I wrote Wavelength. And so the tagline we keep using for Wavelength in all the promotions is that it's like Hannah Montana meets Heartstopper. And the first time that I had a friend compare it to Hannah Montana. They're like, it's like queer Hannah Montana. I had this moment where I was so offended. Um, uh, and I was like, no, it's not. And then immediately it started growing on me because when I wrote Wavelength, um, I wanted a story that was like a story that like the Disney Channel would tell. And I wanted a story that had found family like a Sarah Dessen novel would have or something like that. Like it had all these sort of magical things that I grew up with, but that I wasn't in terms of gender and in terms of sexuality. So it's a lot of the feel of those things, but with this cast full of young queer people. And I wanted to have this queer space to dream and to imagine into. Um, and I think so when I started, when I came up with the idea for Wavelength, it was a story that I would tell myself to help myself fall asleep as a teenager, because I was an insomniac as a teenager. So it's always been this like comfort story to me. We have this like runaway pop star, and there's this fun imagining of getting to be like, you get to imagine yourself as a pop star, but also get to imagine this like, oh, what if this pop star like shows up at your school and joins your friend group and maybe joins your band and you fall in love and all these sort of really sort of fan fiction-y kind of fun things that are sort of uh, a bit of like a fairy tale in some ways. And so then I think what we wind up with, hopefully, is that Wavelength is this story of comfort. And so it talks a lot about gender and sexuality and orientation. But those conversations and thoughts are very, very focused on the expansiveness and the joy and the moments of euphoria. Um, and to such an extent where even I take some of the incidents that might be more traumatizing in that space and they happen off screen, and things like that to just try to really have this yeah, this really safe space. So I wanted somewhere where these queer characters can like deal with a lot of conflicts and relationships and all this sort of like teenage mayhem that is not about or because of their gender or sexuality. It's just sort of what they just get to be themselves as a baseline, and they have a lot of acceptance around them. And they get to live really large and express really large on stage and have their hearts broken and fall in love and all these great things. And so I started writing this book 6 years ago. Um, and I think it's feeling extra important this year as it comes out because things are really bad for queer youth in a lot of places. They're looking down, I think, the barrel of a really massive regression in their rights. Um, And so there are some things about protesting in this book and things like that, and about carving out space for yourself. But mostly, I think of Wavelength as sort of like a haven for young queer readers, as sort of like this safe space to stop and breathe and celebrate, which yeah, feels really needed. Okay. And then maybe, let's see. I'll tell you a bit about the characters because they're so beautiful on the cover there. Bhavna did just like this, they just did this incredible art for it. I'm just like in awe of the cover that they did. Um, so the characters, in terms of there's a dual narration, we've got both Sasha and Lillian there on the cover, and they both narrate. And we were talking about short chapters. I love short chapters. This book is 100 chapters long because they keep jumping back and forth really quick because it's like candy, and I like that. Just like I lose focus and momentum otherwise as a reader. And so there, in terms of, diversity, what they bring in terms of that is the things that are closest, of course, to my own lived experience. And those are the types of things that are seen most closely in the narration. So they're both 17. Sasha is this, we talked about this runaway pop star. They've maintained this anonymity, and now they're facing pressure to reveal their real face in public to defend their pop star brother, who's caught up in this big celebrity trial. And so they flee and they go to find somewhere to finish high school and exist away from the spotlight. And that's the sort of the start of our story. Like that's what kicks it off. Um, and Sasha's narration, I think, gives uh, a lot of like inside perspective on being non-binary and gender fluid. Um, and in terms of having like a depth of community and belonging in really deep ways. Lillian is our other narrator. She's sort of the normal person in the pop star romance. And she's really going through it at the start of the book. She's had a really big breakup with her long-term girlfriend who's also in the band or was in the band. Um, and her story is a lot about the mental health things that follow her everywhere, whether her life is going good or bad, and learning that she doesn't have to be suffering to create her art, and learning what to do with feeling things so deeply that she's like drowning in them. Lillian's story is a lot about falling in love for the second time, which I think is maybe the most confusing one. And I wanted to have that space in YA when so much YA is about uh, love stories where characters are falling in love for the first time. Um, and then maybe I'll just give a couple of practical details about it. So Wavelength is coming out on October 7th this year. It's published by Groundwood Books. And in terms of like sort of very librarian type information here, it's distributed by the University of Toronto Press in Canada and by Publishers Group West in the United States. And I'm so excited to get this book into the hands of young readers. And I think libraries are really, truly like the greatest and most accessible way to do that. So, yeah,
Good. And and they're safe places.
yes.
That that was excellent. And I would like to know how you had so much information about a young, about a teenage pop star and what they go through. Now, I didn't think of Hannah Montana, and I probably, and I'm not really very, very clued into the ones now, but of course, I knew about Justin Bieber and Miley Cyrus, and what that must have done to their lives. And as I was reading about Sasha, I could see the angst and that it was horrendous for him to be living this life. How did you know all that?
So I think this is where I think there's sort of a couple parts to it. One is that um, in some ways it's very information about celebrities is extremely, extremely accessible. That's how they are celebrities. And you even mentioned there's all these sort of generations of different people who have worked through sort of different iterations of the like young starlet kind of factory that, in some of the past decades has been like the Disney Channel, say. Um, and so I think a lot of it comes from that. Um, and I think a lot of it, I take a real caution when I write YA to not go on and on about the things that will maybe only be interesting to me. And
Okay.
so I made a lot of it up. And I think that's because um, I wanted it to feel like a little bit magical and things like that. And so I took all this stuff I knew um, and I picked pieces out of it to create, I think, something that felt like it was cohesive into the story and didn't just ramble on about my interests of sort of the pop star factory thing.
Good. That's really good. Thank you so much, Kale. I'm sorry that I really didn't ever teach at any of your schools or now let's go to Monica Ancilis. And we have no, I think Rushira, you're next, aren't you? It's just that Monica was next on my screen. So Rushira is our next person, and we are going to talk about The Freedom Seeker by Rushira Gupta. And she is an Emmy-winning journalist, a feminist campaigner, a professor at the university at New York University, and she's also the founder of the anti-sex trafficking organization APNI, AP Women Worldwide. Now, since this is a webinar about authors, I won't dwell on the incredible work Ms. Gupta does for humanity, but I urge you to read it for yourselves on the internet. 12-year-old Simi's story in Freedom Seeker is deeply personal to Ms. Gupta, who spent time in the Syrian desert experiencing the brutal heat and scarcity of water that many migrants face, so she could really understand what Simi and others like her went through on their journeys. Alan Gratz, the best-selling author of Refugees, summed up the story perfectly. He wrote, "At once maddening and heartbreaking, The Freedom Seekers shows young readers there is hope." Ruchira spends her time between Delhi and New York, and I guarantee this is going to keep you engrossed every step of the way. Go ahead, please, Ruchira.
Thank you, Susie, and thank you, Kale, for reminding us why we write books. Also to Eleni for organizing this wonderful webinar. I'm learning as much as I hope to share with all of you. I am an activist. I became an activist because I was a journalist. I was walking the hills of Nepal when I came across rows of missing girls in village after village. And I had to find out why. And I found, as I followed the trail from the villages of Nepal to the brothels of Bombay, that little girls were locked up in cages on display to be sold to the highest bidder. And I made a documentary, won an Emmy, but I realized that I'm going to use my Emmy not to build a career in journalism, but to make a difference. And so now I call myself an activist author or an activist storyteller because along with setting up Apne Aap, which Susie spoke about, to help girls who might be sold, or are sold, I also want to reach more and more young people across the world in the two countries, especially that I live in, United States and India, and tell them that they can fight injustice, they can win. And I write adventure stories. Freedom Seeker is an adventure story, and it's about a little girl called Simi who has to flee religious violence in India, and they pay these people called coyotes, smugglers, to take them across the border. And the border is tough. The desert is tough, exactly as Susie explained. Knowing a foreign language is tough. Border guards, detention camps, everything is new. And then on top of that, the coyotes separate Simi from her mother. But my story is not about the separation, but about Simi's spirit, how she finds her mother, how she finds her father, and how the family reunites, and what children go through when they seek home and safety. They don't leave home because they want to. Simi is a hockey captain in India. She's doing well in school. She's got loving grandparents, friends. And yet she has to make this journey all the way across oceans and continents and deserts to come to find her father, who's a taxi driver in Queens, in New York. So I've written it like an adventure story because there are challenges, there are bad people, and how Simi overcomes them. I also written in which I have found in my own life as an activist that little acts of kindness go a long way. So I keep explaining in The Freedom Seeker and my earlier book, I Kick and I Fly, both published by Scholastic for young readers, is that every act of kindness matters. You know, when we are doing something, we don't realize if it's big or small. Only time will tell us. But we have to do it as if it matters. And I have found that even my smallest acts of kindness did make a difference. So the Freedom Seeker is also about that Simi encounters horrible situations, bad people, but she also finds really good people, a kind border guard who plays a game with her, a board game inside a detention camp with her, a nurse when she's in the infirmary who talks to her and gives her some answer, a kind teacher, a group of mothers who helps to ferry her mother from where she was detained all the way to Queens. So all these people together actually build a human chain. So that's the other lesson that I want to share through the adventure of social justice, is that people can come together and help each other when we feel that the world is too big, the problems are too daunting. And the story is based on true life, just like I Kick and I Fly. So it is based on families that have come here from India who have got separated either on the Indo-Canada border or the Mexico-US border in the desert. Some made it, some did not make it. And how just human acts and humanity at a time when we are facing such daunting odds is a big act of resistance. So this story is really Simi's journey as she walks, and she's helped by a boy called Jose, who's 15, and he's from Honduras. His mother is a teacher, and they are fleeing gang warfare. And Simi doesn't know Spanish, she doesn't even know English. And they have to cross this desert. She doesn't know the system. Jose does because he's heard about it from other migrants. And so, how they help each other, the friendship they form in shelters, and how all this becomes this huge victory, this win when they reach Queens. So, that's what the Freedom Seeker is about: hope, kindness, seeking safety and home and family.
One of the things I really loved about it was you set the story immediately with Simi and her family, both sets of grandparents, and the mother and father. And then the reason why she had to leave was because her mother was Muslim and her father was Sikh, I think. But it was the Hindus that were driving her family out of there. And that was kind of surprising to me. I didn't realize there was so much animosity there, but I loved it that the family was so warm and caring, and we saw a lot of that. We saw that right away before all the harshness and the trouble started. So that was good. That was
Thank
excellent.
you. Yes, because families do matter in love and friendship. Because, the world is changing. It's in a state of flux. Systems are collapsing. We know midday meal programs are disappearing. School budgets are becoming smaller. Medicaid, all kinds of things are happening. So, what can we hold on to? Each other. And we will find strength there. I found this through 30 years of activism.
That's good. Thank you very much. And wonderful that you're doing the work you're doing.
Thank you.
Sure. Monica, you're up now, and you have written a wonderful story or a wonderful book. It's not really a story, but a wonderful book called Leyendas and Legends. And you were born in the small coastal town of Ensenada in Baja California. And is that in Mexico? Monica Mancilas moved to the US when she was 2 years old. As a little girl, her friends didn't think she was Mexican, but her father took her on a journey through Latin America so she could see all the shades of Latinos. I suspect that this is one of the reasons she wrote legends, so other children could see the richness of the Latin culture. Monica says stories have been my passion since I was a little girl, whether brought to me on paper, screen, or the evergreen power of song. She is a musician, an educator, and an author of picture books, middle grade fiction, and nonfiction. She holds a BA in anthropology, and after college, she moved to Los Angeles, where she worked in the recording industry for 10 years. Leyendas Legends highlights 60 inspiring Latin individuals from across the Americas: artists, scientists, astronauts, athletes, musicians, world leaders, and more. It's an empowering read for 8 to 12-year-olds. Please tell us about your book.
Thank you, Susie.
Sure.
And first, I want to thank both you and Elenita and all the librarians and all of the authors who are sharing this time with me. I think that right now, as a few of you have mentioned, we're going through some turbulent times, and to have you all continue to hold space for stories like ours that show different perspectives is incredibly important right now. So I thank all of you for taking the time to do that.
We need you to speak up a little bit.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I'll bring my laptop closer. Is that any better?
Yes, a little bit better, yeah.
Okay. Alda, you actually have me beaten by in your 7-year journey to publication. I always tell the story of this one because it took an unusually long time to publish. I actually sold this book to Chronicle in early 2020, so right before everything shut down. And I wound up spending a year during lockdown researching all of the incredible figures in this book and curating the list and going through the editing process, which made it a unique challenge because I wasn't able to venture out into the world and go and actually speak with librarians and have face-to-face contact. So I did most of the initial research on this book online, watching videos and scouring newspapers and using the bright side of the internet to access knowledge. And we curated a list of dozens and dozens, and from there narrowed it down. What our aim really was to present the broadest range of Latina figures, either from who live in the United States or who live or have lived outside of the United States. We wanted to showcase the fact that Latina people are not the monolith that they are showcased as on television and in the media, that we come from a variety of nationalities, races, gender orientations, sexual orientations, religious backgrounds, ethnicities, cultural traditions. And so we really tried to showcase as broad a range as we could. So as much as I loved including people that everyone has already heard of, like, Frida Kahlo and Amalia Hernandez, Dolores Huerta, kind of the household Latina names, Shakira. I also, the ones that I actually took the most pleasure in researching and getting to know about were the people that maybe a lot of people haven't heard about or didn't know were connected to some of the biggest advents in our society. For example, Louis Van An, who was the creator of CAPTCHA and Duolingo, is Latino. I loved showcasing people like Sophie Cruz, who was only 5 years old when she found out that her parents were undocumented and became the youngest activist that I've known of, and got the audience of Pope Francis and had him speak with Congress in favor of helping undocumented workers, undocumented immigrants like her family. So I really hope that young people, young readers of all different backgrounds will find inspiration in this book and see that anybody from any background, any age can make a huge impact on our world. And of course, as you mentioned, the origin of the book was the fact that as I was growing up, I often felt like I was a bit of an outsider. I didn't quite belong in American culture. I didn't quite belong in the Mexican space. And some of that, a lot of that, was due to the fact that the representations I saw in the media didn't resonate with my own experience or what I saw in the mirror or what my family was. My father, who was also from Ensenada, is a neurobiologist, and you didn't see neurobiologists from Latin America on television. And so I really, when I was about 13 years old, I went to my dad and I said, I communicated to him that I was going through this kind of identity crisis of being Mexican, wanting to connect to my culture, but feeling that I didn't quite belong. And that was when he took me on my first trip down south in Mexico and introduced me to the broad range of cultural traditions and landscapes and food and architecture and history. And that's just in one small part of the country I come from. Doesn't include the entirety of Latin America. So I really wanted to put that into a book. And, even though it took 5 years, I think that now is probably the moment that it's needed the most to combat what we are seeing currently all over social media and all over television and in the news media about what Latina people in the United States contribute and who they are. And so I would appreciate it more than to see this book in as many libraries as possible in the United States so that young readers can be properly educated on who we are and also take pride in this broad range of cultural experience and connection. Oh, you're still muted.
Absolutely. Tell me this, how did you really narrow it down to 60 people?
It was tough. I think my editor and I probably started with a list of well over 100. And then we curated it, as I said, first of all, well, it started very Mexico heavy because that was my own cultural experience. And so we wanted to make sure that we pulled in as many different countries and backgrounds as we could. And then we also had sensitivity readers take a look at the initial list and just, research whether there were any potentially problematic characters. And so we kind of weaned it down from there. But it was definitely a very, very well thought out back and forth between me and the editorial team.
Makes me sad that even you're saying problematic characters since I'm living in Florida. And, 400 books were taken off the shelves, but I think that that's pretty much going away because Governor DeSantis is falling into much disfavor. So,
Well, I'm any news of pushback against our freedom of speech and censorship is good news to me.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Anything else that you'd like to mention about what you did when you were working on this wonderful project?
Oh, I did want to actually just showcase a few of these illustrations because Isadora Seferino is the illustrator on this project, and man, did she do an absolutely gorgeous job. I just love all the bright, popping illustrations, the bright color palette that she used. And we also did try to kind of make the text a little bit easier for the reader who maybe doesn't want to spend time reading an entire page to just kind of take the little snippets, little
Yes, that was
highlights
good.
from each personality story. But yeah, I
That was good.
absolutely love her illustrations. You can see.
I'm sorry I didn't mention those illustrations. And you know why? It was because it was the first book I read. So then I forgot about that. Thank you
That's
so much, everybody. Elenita, you got some things to say? You need to unmute. Unmute.
Wonderful array of books, and interesting how we all deal with the same issues in different ways, but things come across in our lives that create challenges, and just really wonderful how you've all shared what you've come across and what you've learned in your writing and sharing it with us. And we want to thank you and thank your publishers for working with us on this. And of course, your books are available through Broad Art. And we hope to see you guys again.